everyone, Scott Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5 Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
What's happening, Rush Nation? Here we are. We're back with another podcast. Luckily, I'm not on my own tonight. Stocks is on IR. He, unfortunately, is dealing with a pretty nasty cold. His whole family is. So everyone's down with it, and they seem to be sort of giving it back to each other. It's like pass the parcel in his house with the germs. So, but don't worry, I'm not alone. I brought an amazing guest on with me. Those of you in the UK scene will probably be familiar with this guest. Those of you in the US, you've been missing out. And that means we get to add another pod to the rotation. It's my good buddy Ian Harrison of the Jefferson My Drinks Podcast. Ian, welcome to 5 Yard Rush. It's a pleasure to have you. How you doing, my man?
Oh, I'm really well. I'm buzzing to be honest. Like, I sat there in the waiting room listening to the intro. And the amount of times I hear the intro and I'm listening to the pod, I'm like, that is a really good intro. And then hearing it, knowing that I'm coming on in a couple of seconds, I'm like, oh, I'm really excited. Thanks for having me.
Oh, mate, it's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, that music is. We've had that one a few years now, so we got it remastered. We were borrowing some off it's Ken Sound or whatever originally, and then I think we got it remastered. And then obviously we had Scott on in, I want to say 2020. I actually can't remember anymore. It might be 2019. It was a long time ago. We had Scott on. It was 2019, 2020, I think. I think it was before COVID. I'm pretty sure it was before COVID. Yeah. Might have even been 2018. I genuinely can't remember. It was a long time ago. We've been doing this such a long time now. It's like it's just mad. So So and then we said to Scott, like, do you mind just recording an intro over like before we start the pod? And he was like, Yeah, sure, no worries. But you nailed it one take.
Of course.
We gave him I know, stupid. We gave him like the text and everything.
Like, he does 7 hours every Sunday with no retakes. So
I know it's bad. Not only do it in one take, like we gave him the lines and he did his own, and it was so much better than what we did. I was like, oh great. So
I don't know if you saw it this morning, but on Good Morning Football, they were saying that Scott Hansen should be in charge of delivering the US election results. He should be doing that. Do that as like a live red zone and go from state to state. Scott Hansen is announcing the winners in every state.
Oh, that would be amazing. Yeah. All right. Yeah, we got to make that happen.
You'd watch that. You'd definitely watch that, wouldn't you?
Oh, all day long. It'd be the most incredible thing to watch. I could just listen and watch him all day. Like, to be perfectly honest, he's just got the most incredible voice and what he does.
Might get a bit creepy after a while. when you're looking through his bathroom window and like, well, Scott, do something.
Maybe not. Maybe we just need that more in our lives. Maybe we need a bit more of that creepiness. But yes, we are here and we are ready. So it is in the middle of the trade deadline. There is 27 minutes, I believe, the trade deadline. 27 minutes of trade deadline left. A trade has just gone through. Tre'Davious White has been traded from the Rams to the Ravens, which is an interesting one because I think he's probably been one of the worst corners in the NFL this year. So
that is strange, and it's not like the Ravens are crying out for corners either, really.
No, they've had a couple of injuries back there, so I guess a bit of depth. He's not on a big contract. He's out at the end of the year, so all in for the push. It's cost them a 2026 7th, and they're getting a 2027 7th back. So it's a kind of like there's
basically nothing.
Yeah. So I mean, it kind of makes sense, but I hope he's just going as a depth piece because he doesn't. Yeah, I wouldn't feel comfortable starting him to any great length. So other trades of the day so far: Preston Smith has gone to the Steelers. He was a 7th round pick. Big contract in the next 2 years. 13 and a half and over 14 million. So he is big contract. So that's why it's not a lot there. The Vikings have signed John Parker Romo, who's someone I've never heard of as a kicker position because Will Reichard. Yeah, he's gone to IR.
Yeah, fantastic.
Probably I think the best deal of the day is Marshall Lattimore to the Commanders.
I think on the defensive side of the ball, I think definitely. I think Mike Williams to the Steelers for a 5th round is a good one.
Yeah, I mean, it is and it's not. Like it is in the sense of if it was almost any other team, I'd go, yeah, I'd get that. The Steelers are just like, you don't really chuck the ball all that much.
I think they're more prone to throwing the ball out. Now it's Russell Wilson. Now Russ is cooking. I think it's a good move. If it was still Justin Fields, there'd be more trepidation about that move. But with the fact that it's Russ, it's a better move.
Yeah, there's value in it. He obviously. My favorite part of this was Aaron Rodgers went on to the Pat McAfee show and started explaining how it didn't really work out for Mike Williams. That he missed quite a bit of time with injury and getting back, and he missed the mini camps. And I was sitting there thinking, like, that was the mini camp you didn't attend because you decided not to go to mandatory mini camp, Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
So, wait, what?
Yeah, you were in a dark room somewhere in the middle of nowhere. How would you know?
Yeah, that makes no space for me. But anyway, there you go. And then one of the strangest deals of the day was Jonathan Mingo going to the Cowboys for a 4th round pick, which I just thought was quite a price to pay for him.
Yeah, well, it's Mingo and a 7th for a Cowboys 4th round pick, which is even weirder. Like I couldn't even get a 4th round pick in fantasy for Mingo. So
I mean, I remember.
I don't know what the Cowboys are doing.
I remember when Mohamed Sanu went for a 2nd round pick. And I said, it smacks of this. It smacks of this. Just like the Cowboys, and then they've done it with Dak Prescott out for multiple weeks. I'm like, I don't really get it. Like, unless you think he's like a future, and you're like, okay, fine. Look, we wanted to draft him, we've got him, and we're not thinking about this year. But you're probably getting rid of your coach at the end of the year.
Yeah,
it doesn't.
If not before.
Yeah, it's a strange one. I don't really get it in any strength, but there you go. That's where we are. So I'm trying to think if there's been any other deals done. I'm sure there's one I've missed.
Yeah, there is. One for us. One for the Bengals.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Khalil Herbert for a 7th round pick, which is I think that's a great move. Zach Moss is going down to IR because of his neck injury.
Yeah, so he won't be coming back for that.
No. Well, he's definitely going to miss the rest of the regular season, is what they're saying. If we make the playoffs, we'll see where we're at then. But Khalil Herbert, contract year, so he's got a chance to prove that he's actually worth something. And he's been buried, hasn't he, at the Bears?
Yeah, it's a really strange one because every time he sort of played, he sort of flashed. He's been underutilized. He's one that the fantasy community really love. But then I always look at this and think, like, well, every time he's had a chance, someone has always usurped him. So I just think, like, he was the incumbent, and they decided for when Montgomery, that's okay, he's behind Montgomery, fair enough. Even though Montgomery wasn't pulling up trees in Chicago, he's buried behind him. And then when he came in, he kind of did all right, but he couldn't really nail down a full-time row. And then you're like, okay, so now he's the incumbent. Then they go out and get Swift, and they pay him a lot of money, and that says a lot. And they've deferred a lot of his touches, and he's buried in that depth chart now. So it's kind of a strange one. I think I get it for the Bengals because you are on the push to try and get into the playoffs. Zach Moss is down. Chase Brown's been phenomenal, but as we know, your colleagues have jumped in. But yeah, I think definitely when I look at this and think that it's a good move because it's a 7th round pick. No one cares. 7th round pick. You're not going to get better than what you got. So it kind of makes a lot of sense. And you think even if he doesn't play, it's kind of a risk free. He's not on a big contract. Kind of makes a lot of sense. So
Yeah, and there's a few people, especially in the groups that I'm in, they're worried about Chase Brown's usage going forward. It's not something to be worried about at all. Chase Brown's definitely, especially after this week, he is RB1 there, and Khalil Herbert is purely there as like a third down back and just to spell Chase Brown when he needs a bit of a blow.
Yeah. And that's what I mean. And these backs that have been around the league a couple of years and not on big contracts, getting them at this time of the year is valuable. I'm surprised you don't see more of these archetypal sorts of deals. Like, I'm genuinely surprised nobody's got on the phone to Tampa and said, hey, we will give you like a 6th round pick for Sean Tucker. Like, I'm genuinely shocked at this stage that there are teams crying out there for running backs, and yet you've got the guy who, okay, it's on 63 snaps, but has got the most amount of fantasy points per snap in the NFL of running backs. And he's looked explosive when he's played. Yeah, okay, he's not got loads of games in him, but he also doesn't have loads of mileage in the tank. He's a good young player. Cough up a cheap pick. I'm sure that the Bucks would probably take it given where they are, but
yeah,
I don't know. It's a strange one. Like,
although,
I think there's a lot of these sort of running backs that are kind of really buried in depth charts, and you think, Emery DeMarcado is another one in Arizona. I think like someone could put him to some use somewhere. Like he's not a bad back. Like he could do some work, but I don't think
he looked absolutely rapid this weekend as well, didn't he?
Yeah.
That touchdown really he scored. Oh my God, he has got some speed.
Yeah, and you just sit there thinking like he's barely going to play. Like he's third on the depth chart, and you just sit there and you think surely someone's got to take a punt and just go, okay, we'll snap him up for a 6th round pick, because I don't know why not. But anyway, we're sidetracked. We're going to break out any more news that comes out in the next 20 minutes. Plus, I would say probably the hour after. We won't be on air long enough to report the election results. I think that's going to be a few days before we know who wins that. But let's talk about week 9 for you. What were some of the things that surprised you from the week that we've just had?
I think H is going to hate this, but the Texans are really struggling without Nico Collins.
Yeah.
Really struggling.
They are struggling. I didn't expect them to lose Thursday Night Football, I'll be honest with you. But yeah, Jets are a good D. It's kind of one of those things. I don't think they've really hit the strides this year, but they're 6-3. They're in an interesting. I mean, they're in a good division, so you'd expect them to bank at least one home game. You'd expect them to win that division comfortably. But yeah, they have struggled. They've struggled a little bit in their second season syndrome. We see it quite a lot in players where expectation levels have lifted, and some of these players are feeling it. I think it's fair to say there was no expectation last year. So
no, and I think they're not getting the luck either. Like, I'm not sure if you saw it on Thursday night or even on the replay, but there was an instance where Fairbairn missed a 56-yard field goal and then scored from 54. But the Texans got a first down for roughing the long snapper, which then ended up with Fairbairn missing from 27. So they wasted a load of time on the clock and lost 3 points because he nailed a 54-yarder and then missed the 27-yarder.
Mm.
But then in that same game, Malachi Corley with one of the dumbest fumbles.
I mean, like, that's the sort of stuff that if he'd done that 20 years ago, he'd have been cut. Like, he literally would have put his pads away and they've said, don't bother getting there, back up, son. Get your bag, you're off. Don't come back. Yeah, I mean, it's embarrassing. Like, and it's the most Jets thing ever, really, isn't it? Like, you would sit there, and if I sat there and someone told me that and said, "Oh, what team did that?" The first team I said was the Jets. Like, he's just sort of, it could only happen to them, that kind of scenario where he fumbles.
But they've been flexed out of prime time for, is it next week?
Yeah, next week. I mean, nobody wanted to watch. Was it them and the Chargers?
No, they flexed I can't remember the Jets were playing, but it's Bengals v Chargers.
That's right. They flexed the Bengals in, and they took the Jets out. Not a big surprise. They've had quite a few primetime games this year. I feel like they've had their fair share. But yeah, I think you're right about the Texans. But then Nico Collins could be back this week, and it could really help them get going. Is there anything else that really kind of gave you any surprise, or anything that you kind of learned or surprised from this week, from week 9?
The whole situation with Chris Olave is worrying.
Mm.
I mean, this is now his 4th concussion in the NFL, and he had 1 in college.
Yeah.
Which people aren't talking about. And I think it's not a great outlook for him.
No, it's not a great outlook.
I mean, the hit was pretty ruthless.
Yeah, it's one of those hits that goes unpunished in the NFL, but really should be.
Yeah.
Sandwiched between 2, and you just and the thing is, the interesting thing, I said this on the Fantasy Wildcard Rewind podcast last night, is he got a concussion 3 weeks ago against the Bucks, and then last week in week 8 he got he left the game with a suspected concussion, and then he was cleared, and then now he's back in the concussion protocol. So it's you sit there and you say, right, 4 or 5 concussions, that's really bad. He's had 2 in a month, and 1 suspected concussion. So that head is literally been rattled for a month.
Well, yeah.
And you got to look at their situation. They're 2-7. They fired their head coach Dennis Allen this week. Darren Rizzi will want to go out there and get out there, and he'll want to win games, but he's not going to risk Chris Olave in week 10, and I'd be surprised if he risked him in week 11. So if it was me now, as a fantasy owner, if I had Chris Olave in my team, I'd be planning to not have him until week 13 at the earliest. I think you really got to look at the fact that he should miss 2 weeks and then the bye. And if he is back before then, I question the concussion protocol, because I seem to think that I think he probably skipped a step before to get back in week 8. And then I'm not saying that the week 9 is related to that, but the fact is I don't know how fully recovered he was and has now endured that. And it's just, player safety's got to be paramount in all of this.
Oh, absolutely. But by the time he's ready to return, the Saints could be at the point of tanking.
Well, I don't think the players will tank, and I don't think the coaching staff will. Now that Dennis Allen has gone, Darren Rizzi will want to. He's playing for a job. So, and those players are playing for a job. Derek Carr's playing for his job. The only one you would say that isn't really playing for a job is Alvin Kamara. He's the only one really on that roster you'd say is safe. Everyone else on that team, they've just shipped Marshawn Lattimore out of there today. That team is talent poor. There isn't a lot on that team. And you have to sit there and think, well, if they're going to ship everyone out, like everyone on that roster is playing for a contract, whether it's with the Saints or it's with another team. And so for me, it's like they can't afford to tank. Like, yeah, I get it. The fans will go, get us the first round, get us the number 1 overall pick. I don't think that the 1 overall pick is going to solve their problem. Like, I think they could go in a number of directions in the first round next year. Like, I could name 7 positions they could go for, and they're going to pick in the top 4 or 5. So, I don't think Darren Rizzi's going to let them tank, because he's just not that sort of character. I liken him quite a bit to Dan Campbell, full of fire. He will energize the players. And I think Dennis Allen's, he seems like an okay bloke, but he's not a motivator. We saw what happened with the week 18 scenario last year where his team scored a touchdown running up the score, and he went out and apologized on behalf of his player. And you lose players for that. Like, players are trying to earn, like, all we had to do is go out and say players are playing for their contracts and bonuses. Yeah. Who am I to deny them money? Like, who am I to deny them money? Yeah, that's if he says that, or the whole conversation is squashed. Because it's like, okay, well, these are second string players who are only getting game checks. So Jamal Williams is on a he gets compensated for the touchdown. James Williams gets compensated for it. Like, you're playing with people's money. Like, ultimately, if you put that out there, I don't think anyone bats an eye. And then he's saying, oh, well, I told them not to score and they've gone against my decision. I just think, well, then you look weak.
Well, yeah.
They've not listened to you.
Yeah, you wouldn't admit it publicly.
No. And then I think
what do you think the chances are of the Saints re-signing Michael Thomas now?
None. None. I don't think Michael Thomas would sign. I mean, like, he went on a tirade on Twitter at Derek Carr. Yeah, that was something. If you've not had a chance, go and look at Michael Thomas's Twitter. My favorite point of all this is when he drove out through somewhere in Mexico, where he was on Sunday, and he started pulling up local passersby and saying, like, what do you think of the Saints? What do you think of Derek Carr? And he's just asking random people in the street, like, what?
I mean, like, this is coming from someone that's not even got a job in the NFL, and I think Derek Carr handled it. He handled it like an absolute professional.
Yeah,
and he handled it with a lot of dignity. Well, he handled it in a much better way than I would have done.
Yeah, I mean, he's had a tough week. He's probably had one of the worst weeks of any professional going. He got his coach fired. He for the second time.
For the second time, yeah.
Which is the first time that's happened. First player to lose to 31 teams in the NFL. He's got the opportunity to complete the set against the Raiders in week 17.
Oh, no way. I didn't know that one.
Week 17 they play the Raiders. So he's got the opportunity to complete the set there. And then, he said Michael Thomas said him on Twitter. So, and Chris Olave's brother, don't forget, he was very much in that camp as well.
Yeah, he was, yeah. Yeah. But while we're on the Raiders, they've cleaned house, haven't they?
Yeah.
They've fired 3 coaches.
It's a little inside joke. No need for Mason to move into Mason. Yeah. I went on the Wildcard Rewind podcast last night, and I was asked the question of, is there anyone on the Saints I would take with Chris Olave out? And I said, well, I'd throw Mason Tipton out there because he's in the Rashid Shaheed role. That's a role that is very defined on that roster. There's no other wide receivers. Like, he could very simply put up 0, but
yeah,
if you're in a team where you are starting Braylon Allen and his 5 or 6 fantasy points a week, then why not throw the Hail Mary and throw Mason Tipton out there? Manifest it to the world. And so Rob's referencing that. Cheers, Rob. Yeah, so basically, I think there is a role for him in those desperation plays. If you're chasing the touchdown or one of those like 3 for 121 in 2 weeks, he's got that potential ceiling, but there is also every chance that he scores 0. So only do it if you're looking at that desperation play, or you're projected to lose by 20 in those kind of scenarios that are out there that we talk about all the time. I want to talk to you a little bit about Chase Brown, because one of the things I noticed with Chase Brown this week, we talked about him being the guy. He played 80% of snaps last week, which I thought was really high considering the score. I was surprised he played that much, but that obviously was down to the fact there wasn't anyone else. So maybe that explains a lot about what's happened today. 11 high-value touches, so that's touches inside the 10. 32 touches, 157 yards. I mean, it was a huge game for him. Do you see him as someone who could be a potential wide receiver 1 going forward? Running back 1 going forward.
In the NFL, I mean, his stats are up there anyway. I think his yards per carry are higher than Derrick Henry's, and Henry's got more 20+ yard carries than anyone else in the NFL. But more than anyone
for the rest of the season for fantasy,
the entire season. But for the rest of the season for fantasy, yeah, I think he could be. Especially if we get T. Higgins back. I don't know whether we'll trade him today or whether he's going to be back in the fold. Could be a season holdout. I think when T. Higgins is back and he's stretching the field, that's going to leave a lot of room underneath for Chase Brown. And we are throwing him swings and screens too. So we are trying to get him outside the tackles and get him to use that pace. And when you've got your running back catching passes out of the backfield, that's fantasy gold.
Yeah. And it's a great offense. And as you say, with T. Higgins out, that's that's something that will become more appealing. There was also a big shift in fantasy this week. I picked up Mike Gesicki as a desperation play at tight end. He put out a monster week, and for me, especially with Eric All out now with an ACL injury, he's done for the year.
Yeah.
He is clearly the downfield weapon now. There's no Higgins, so he's Mike Gesicki, someone who is that potential waiver wire pick at tight end, trying to catch some gold for a couple of weeks to help get you into a playoff. Assuming that there's not going to be Higgins and there's not much going forward in the passing attack.
Well, yeah, that's what happened over the weekend because with no Higgins, it just allowed them to double team Chase on pretty much every play. So Burrow had to spread it around. I mean, he spread it around that well that Drew Sample, who's our blocking tight end, our fourth choice tight end, he even got a touchdown. That's how well Burrow was doing spreading the ball around. And if T. Higgins doesn't come back or he's injured for a few more weeks, Gesicki's going to have a big part to play in this offense.
Yeah, I definitely see he's got a really defined role now that is going to be really prominent. And there's issues with Jermaine Burton. Yoshi Vash has got a defined role that is limited, but it is what it is. Like it's not horrendous for fantasy. It's not great for fantasy. It's kind of one of those, if you need to put 8 to 10 points in a flex, in a desperation, then fine, but there's no ceiling there to be chasing. Yeah. So it feels like to me that if you're sitting there at tight end and you're struggling and you're like, well, there's not much to really propel you going forward. You've played Zach Ertz or Noah Fant. You played these guys. Zach Ertz's role is pretty much eradicated now, and you're desperate for a pickup. It seems to me that Mike Gesicki's got to be pretty much near the top of the list for tight end pickups this week.
Well, he should be. He was tight end one this week. So a load of targets. His main competitor, Eric Hall's out for the rest of the season with an ACL. Pick him up at least for while T. Higgins is out.
Yeah, and if you're chasing those wins, if you're chasing wins to get into the playoffs, it's a good acquisition move to look at. Other things that surprised me was the Bears players seem to have given up under Matt Eberflus. DJ Moore walked off mid-play. I don't think I've ever seen that in the NFL. I would have normally put it down to just there was confusion. He thought that the play was over and he walked off. But then a few plays later when Caleb Williams was hobbling, he sort of shoulder checked him. As he walked past him, he dropped the shoulder, and he sort of. I was like, and then he went on 570 to score, and he's talking to talk radio, and they point blank asked him, "Has the coach lost the team?" And he says, "I wouldn't say no." He's like, he needs to stack up. He's like, the team effectively are starting again. But he has to stack up wins.
Yeah.
And that's your star acquisition is clearly very pissed off with the coaching staff. It's a great stat about Matt Eberflus that on away days, so playing away from Soldier Field on Sundays in the NFL, he's 0-18 as a head coach with the Bears.
It always baffles me, these kind of stats. Who does this? Who goes to this level? I mean, it's impressive work. It's very impressive work, but that is niche.
Yeah, well, I could go one further. I looked up all the I looked up for the show yesterday all the quarterbacks that he had beaten as a head coach, and I appreciate it's a bit harsh because it is sort of not just a head coach stat, but let's see if I can find it. Here we go. Right, so here is these are all the quarterbacks that he has beaten as a head coach. You'll enjoy this. Where is it? It is right. Trey Lance and the Monsoon, Davis Mills, Mac Jones and Bailey Zapp as a duo, Sam Howell, Brian Hoyer, Bryce Young, Josh Dobbs, Jared Goff, fair cop, but it was in sub-zero temperatures. Kyler Murray, Desmond Ridder, Will Levis, the Rams and Matt Stafford, but they had no Cooper Kupp, no Puka Nacua, and they missed half their O-line. Andy Dalton and then Trevor Lawrence in London. That's who Matt Eberflus has racked up wins.
That's the level we're looking at.
Yeah, that's who's racked up wins against as a head coach in the NFL. So, it's not impressive. And so
it's
I
not.
genuinely think
from DJ Moore's perspective, like, you are paid to be a professional sports person.
I agree with that.
Like, if you don't agree with the coaching or you're not impressed with your quarterback, deal with it outside of the 60 minutes you've got to play football every week.
Yeah.
Don't be giving up on plays. The only way in my head I can rationalize what DJ Moore did is that he thought he stepped out of bounds and he's gone, right, well, I can't do anything now.
Yeah.
So he's just walked off. But I've seen the replays and I actually don't think he does step out of bounds until he just walks off.
No. But then even then, he should have the awareness to know what's going on and to get back in. He should put some hustle in to try and help his quarterback out. And there's a clear issue between him and Caleb Williams. That is very clear. It's very clear in the body language and the demeanor. It's very clear that his usage in the red zone is very, very low compared to top wide receivers. It's around about 50%. So there is something there. He's clearly not happy. But yeah, as you say, they should find ways to address it. Speaking of a more harmonious team right now in the New York Jets, so with Devontae Adams there joining the Express there, him and Garrett Wilson had 21 combined targets, which was 66% of the total targets. And no other wide receiver or tight end had more than 2, which obviously explains why they got rid of Mike Williams today. But it's really interesting that they have got these 2 guys and they're going to just throw the ball at them and forget everybody else, because it surely seems like a game plan that's destined to fail very, very quickly.
I mean, it's great for those 2 players. It's great for the Jets because, it obviously works on Thursday night. And it's great for fantasy owners of Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson. Mm. Now, I've got a load of Breece Hall, and it wasn't great for me.
No, it's an interesting one. I really thought that they would revert back to type and keep, because Breece Hall running the football last year wasn't particularly impressive, but what he did in the receiving game was really impressive. And I really thought that they would go back to that model because it really worked and they got a lot of wins doing that, but they haven't. I don't think it's long before they do, because I think they've got to be a little bit more dimensional as an offense. Like, it's great. They've got 2 guys. They're balling out. They put up 21 points. Like, they're going to be in games where they're going to be required to get a little bit more than that. And so I think they're going to have to do something that's a little bit more dynamic. They rest too much on the D. So we'll see what happens in future weeks. I would say, as a Breece Hall owner, I'm mildly concerned, but I'm not throwing the towel in just yet. I think it will change.
Yeah, because they got rid of Nathaniel Hackett, and then Breece Hall would have 2 decent weeks, didn't he? Then, like, and we're like, oh, yeah, the Jets have figured out that all they need to do with Breece Hall is what they did last year. And then you get this week where we only had 2 receptions, and we're back to the Jets under Nathaniel Hackett. You're like, come on. But I think this could be a game for the Jets where they've established that they are actually a threat throwing the ball downfield, and that will then open the game up for Breece Hall a bit more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, completely agree. So it's going to be a really interesting passage to play, but we'll see what happens with them. I wanted to talk about some trends that I wanted to pick up really, really quickly. I feel like it's important to try and pick up where the pivots are moving forward, and then I want to get your take on some advice for fantasy owners, like what to do in this phase of the season, because I feel like we're in the part of the season now where the casual players drop off, and I don't think in the UK we have too many casual players. I think most of us are degenerates. But our home leagues, I think, I suppose you have the more casual players. I tend to notice this point in the year that content drops off, viewership drops off. It starts from sort of this week onwards, really, that it starts to go a little bit downhill. And then you end up with basically this tier of players where you have those that are sitting at like 9-0, 8-1, 7-2, probably not as active on the waiver wire, for those short-term gains because they don't add anything to their roster, and if they're only good for a couple of weeks and they're on the course of the playoffs, they might want to conserve fab. Inversely, you got the players who are 2-7, 1-8, 0-9. You're like, they're probably feeling like there's not a lot they can do. So you've got a real shrinkage in terms of activity on waiver wires. So I want to pick that up in a minute. But I just want to reel out some of these pieces and then see if you've got any of these to add. Because I think this is going to set some of the scene for what we're talking about, maybe as trade options, but also just setting up for future weeks. So one of the things that really interests me was on the Dolphins. And I noticed with the Dolphins that we're not seeing the volume out of the passing game, and in particular the wide receivers that we kind of are used to and expected. And it was like, okay, well, Tua's not been there, so that made sense. But it seems to be there has been a dynamic shift in the way that they conduct their offense. And so targets in week 9, so the game just gone, the running backs and the tight ends got 63% of the targets. The wide receivers only got 37% of the targets. This is according to fantasypoints.com. Now, the starts that Tua's had this year, running backs and tight ends have had 53.7% of the targets. The wide receivers, 46.3%. When you had this last year, that number was completely different. It was 32.3% to running backs and tight ends and nearly 68% to wide receivers. So there's been this fundamental shift where targets used to go exclusively to the wide receivers. They're now going to the running backs. They're now going to, Smith, the tight end. It's now going to Achan. They're seeming to getting a huge amount of the targets. And so when you look at Tyreek Hill, his 4 games that he's played with Tua, he's only averaging a 21.8% target share, which is wide receiver 31. So typically his target share would be north of 26, 27. We've seen it in the 30s. So it's a huge decrease in target share. And he's only averaging 14.5 fantasy points a game with the 4 games with Tua. That's wide receiver 20 now. It's not terrible, but it's not what you drafted him at wide receiver 3. But for Jalen Waddle, it's even worse because Jalen Waddle's only getting a 12% target share and 10.2 fantasy points per game. And he's had no games with over 46 yards in it combined since week 1. And so I had someone in my Buccaneers chat message me like, I'm trying to ship Waddle. And I said to him, ship sailed, mate. I think anyone's buying Waddle. Like, I don't think you'll get anything for him because that the guy hasn't put up any points since week 1. And it's clear that offense has shifted to running backs and tight ends. And we've got this point now where it's like with Tyreek Hill, no one's screaming to buy him. And you probably shouldn't, but also someone said sell him to Pete.
Yeah, to be fair, that's an inside joke from our lot because Pete of our podcast, he has got a lot of Jalen Waddle. So if you want rid of Jalen Waddle, Pete is usually the guy to take him off.
All right, I'll try and do that.
He will take Jalen Waddle off your hands everywhere.
There we go.
But I do think this is only a temporary situation. And this is a result of Tua coming back from concussion, and they want to get that ball out of his hands as quickly as possible.
Yeah, but that might be for the rest of the fantasy season.
It might be, but it might just be for a couple of weeks just to build his confidence back up. Because he's probably coming back into this game like last week and the week before. I don't know about you, but I'd have been terrified. One more hit, it might be the end of your career. So I think this is a playbook design specifically to get a bit of confidence back to Tua, because he went 25 of 28 against the Bills. So he's getting the ball out of his hands quickly and he's completing passes. And that's going to do wonders for his confidence. And then maybe this week or the week after, then they'll start stretching it. They'll start opening it up a bit more, let Tua sit in the pocket for a bit longer, let him make some downfield reads and start slinging it with that confidence.
So you're saying Waddle is a sneaky buy low, where I've just said no one to buy him. You can buy Jalen Waddle for next to nothing and see if it rides out.
By nature, I am a risk taker. I see the upside in pretty much every trade.
I don't hate it.
I love making trades. It's a big part of my fantasy season, making trades. I love doing them. And I love doing it for the upsides. And I can always make a case for you trade for Waddle now or trade for Tyreek Hill now with the intention that, when it comes down to playoffs, Tua, as long as he's, because he slid with his head, he dived head first again over the weekend. I was like, what are you doing? And, if Tua gets that confidence back, by the time he gets to the playoffs, they could be firing.
Yeah. Yeah, it absolutely could happen. It's an interesting point. I think that's a fair and rational take, because you're right. What are we seeing in terms of the long term? It is a 4-game sample size. So if it does revert back to 2023, then of course the things could change. So yeah, it's maybe Waddle is a buy low. Maybe maybe you hold on and see what happens. It's definitely an interesting thought. It's just, I guess, the big variant for me here, and the two parts that I guess I'm slightly concerned about is Jonnu Smith and Devon Achane. Devon Achane missed a lot of time last year, but he's obviously very capable of running with the ball in his hands. And Jonnu Smith is unlike any tight end they've had under Mike McDaniel. I know Mike Gesicki was there probably, I think, for the first year of that, but they never utilized him. So I think there is something about the fact that I don't think it will ever go all the way back. I don't think we'll ever see this 67% target share to the wide receivers. I think we are. I think it could go up 100%. I think what you're saying makes a great deal of sense. It's definitely got to go up from 37%. There's no way that number is sustainable in week 9. If it moves to 50-50,
you're not going to win many games by not giving your receivers the ball.
No, and
the
they'll
Dolphins
find that out
to the point now where they need to start winning games.
Well, I think it might be too late for that, given the division. Well, it's going to be hard to get the wild card with a losing record in the AFC. If they're in the NFC, I'd give them half a chance, but the AFC, I think it's probably going to be a little bit difficult for them. But yeah, never say never. One of the things I was really keen to track was what the Commanders would do at running back without Brian Robinson Jr. It was really confusing. Austin Eckler, 36.7% of snaps. Chris Rodriguez, 36.7% of snaps. Jeremy McNichols, 26.7% of snaps. They basically just deferred to a committee. So if Brian Robinson is out, you've got a little bit of flex appeal with Austin Eckler, but don't shoot for the moon. He's not a direct replacement, but don't start Chris Rodriguez or Jeremy McNichols, because there isn't enough tangible there for them to pick up as backup. So I think Robinson should be back this week, which would be good news. But yeah, I definitely think don't go chasing Chris Rodriguez and don't go chasing Jeremy McNichols, because that will cost you big time. Tyrone Tracy, coming off the back of a bad game statistically on Sunday. That was a tough game in general, but actually, if you are a Tracy owner, I want to put some optimism in here. The carries have gone up from 50%, 91%, 70% in the 3 games since Singletree returned from injury. Red zone opportunities were 0 because there wasn't any, then 100%, then 100%. And the weighted opportunities have gone up 56 to 75 to 79. It's also courtesy of fantasy points. Over the next month, he's got Carolina, Dallas, and New Orleans on the schedule, which are 3 teams you can run the football on quite significantly. They're 3 of the bottom 7, including 2 of the bottom 3, including the bottom in Carolina. So really good opportunities here. If you have Tyrone Tracy, then you're in a really good spot. Now could be a good time to trade for him on the back of, if you've got an owner that's a bit twitchy on the back of that performance, doesn't feel comfortable starting him, and you can ship someone over to him that might be slightly more appealing, but really is a bit of a dud. I would be looking to try and extract some value off the back of that. I like these buy low opportunities, and you've been given a real gift with this over the last week or so. So try and exploit that. Travis Kelce's target share last 5 games: 31%, 25.6%, 18.5%, 28.9%, and then a whopping 36.4% last night against the Buccaneers. He's tight in 1 for the rest of the season. Just lock him in every week. We're going to go back to seeing what Travis Kelce does and what he drafted. So Travis Kelce owners should feel pretty comfortable about that. I like to look at trends. I like to look at players that are overly efficient and under efficient. Cooper Kupp is heavily under efficient right now. He's 3.6 fantasy points per game under expected. I'd expect that to regress back to the mean. Two players that are heavily overly efficient right now: Joe Mixon, 3.1 fantasy points over game over expected, and then Saquon Barkley's a whopping 5.3 fantasy points per game over expected. Now, talent is a big thing, and systems a big thing. I get that, but those will regress. Like, just over time and experience, that hyper efficiency will regress. So, just I'm not like you're not going to sit them. Of course, you're not. Just be prepared that what you're seeing right now is not what you're going to see the rest of the season. So just be a little bit cautious on that. I also have on here a couple more stats, and I'll kick it over. Running back leaders in fantasy points per snap. I mentioned Sean Tucker. He is leading this category with a minimum of 50 snaps, but I've done this to a minimum of 100 snaps just to capture the main sort of bell cows. Derrick Henry leads this, so 0.65 fantasy points per snap, followed by Jahmyr Gibbs, 0.61, and David Montgomery. These are all pretty close from here. David Montgomery, 0.6. Ray Davis is the screamer, 0.59 fantasy points per snap. James Cook is right next to him at 0.53. So that Bills running back position is generating really good fantasy points per snap. Two things to be aware of there is, one, they're not getting as many snaps as some of these other players, which is a bit of a concern considering how efficient they are with it. But two, if there is an injury to any one of them, you can plug the other in. They're an immediate, huge upside play for that week. Joe Mixon, 0.52. Chase Brown, 0.49 fantasy points per snap, and that is rising constantly. Devon Achane, 0.48. Alvin Kamara, 0.48. And then Kenneth Walker rounds off the top 10, 0.47. And then the RBs that are leading their teams carries inside the 5. Nick Chubb has 100% of his team's carries inside the 5. Then that's followed by Breece Hall. So this is why I'm saying, don't worry about Breece Hall. There is some underlying numbers that caveat to him still being really strong, and that's one of them, that he is getting almost all the carries inside the 5. Kyron Williams, 86.7. Derrick Henry, 85.7, which is surprising. I thought that number with Lamar Jackson would have dipped a lot more by now, but it hasn't. And then Chuba Hubbard, 81.8, and then Aaron Jones is the only other player over 80%. Any other sort of stats, trends, anything you're sort of picking up from your research that you want to add?
Only as like an outside waiver for this week, just to see if the trend continues. But Nick Westbrook-Akine has scored 4 in 4. It's 4 touchdowns in 4 games, 4 straight games with a touchdown. I mean, he's not scoring many points. His season high 16, which he got this week. He's getting out targeted by Calvin Ridley. In 4 weeks, Calvin Ridley's had 40 targets. Nick Westbrook-Akine has had 16 in that 4-game period. But over those 4 games, Nick Westbrook-Akine has scored 3.8 more fantasy points. So if you're looking to ride a wave, ride Westbrook-Akine's wave.
It's a good one, and with no DeAndre Hopkins there now, there's targets there that are vacated, and there really isn't anyone there that's going to threaten them. So yeah, I like that. That's a really nice one to pick up on. It's another good desperation one for you. There has been a trade at the buzzer. The Texans have traded back up defensive tackle Khalil Davis to the 49ers to add some depth to the 49ers. Not a sexy one to finish the trade deadline with, but nevertheless, that is still one there. They exchange, so basically a 2026 7th round pick for Khalil Davis is what they've coughed up. I seem to think Khalil Davis was drafted quite high. I could be wrong.
Yeah, in my head, I do think he was he top 15?
Oh, I don't think he was quite that high, but I do think he was.
No,
he was a 6th round pick. He was a Bucks pick. That's why I recognize him. Yeah, He was.
So someone's posted a list of the final tally of trades. So Marshawn Lattimore, Devontae Adams, who was weeks ago, D-Hop, Amari Cooper, which people forget because he's been injured.
Yeah.
Deontay Johnson, who he's probably going to have big things at the Ravens. He's going to get a load of work outside of Zay Flowers. Mike Williams, Preston Smith, which we mentioned. Darius Smith, which we mentioned. Khalil Davis. Jonathan Mingo, which is baffling for many reasons. Cam Robinson, Tre'Davious White, Baron Browning, Cardinals, Cam Akers to the Vikings, Khalil Herbert to us, Ernest Jones, Roy Robertson Harris, and Jerome Baker is apparently the final tally.
Yeah. I mean, there's some good ones in there. There's definitely some good players there that have been traded. Ernest Jones, Marshawn Lattimore on the defensive side of the board. Of course, Devontae Adams is the showstopper here. But Amari Cooper, DeAndre Hopkins, Deontay Johnson, they all make really sensible, really, really top draw sort of moves as well. And then, you got some of the more subtle ones, Preston Smith, Zadarius Smith, Baron Browning, I really like. And and then, as you said, with Khalil Herbert going to you. So there's definitely a few interesting trades there. There's a few there that I think are a bit nonsense that don't really add anything, but they are what they are. And it's every year, I think people expect the trade deadline to be a lot busier than it is. I'm probably surprised there was as many as there was today, but all this talk of all the big names were going to get traded, DK Metcalf and Bryce Young, it wasn't going to happen. As much as you try and want that stuff to happen, it never was.
Well, 2 weeks ago it was Stafford and Cup, wasn't it? Stafford and Cup are going.
Yeah, I mean, wasn't confident on much of that happening. Got about 10 minutes left.
No one's going to take Stafford's cap.
No, and nor should they. For a man who is very much the twilight of his career. Got about 10 minutes left. Let's talk a little bit of strategy here. And I know you're a real keen strategist in terms of how you set up lineups and try and get an edge. What's some of the advice you would give to people, again, in that sort of 3-win to 6-win zone, to try and get into the playoffs and cement their place and really sort of get in? Like, how would you be setting up rosters? What sort of buy lows would you be looking to do? What are some of the things you try and do in those scenarios to help get your way into the playoffs?
So at this point of the season, we're 9 games in, and those players that you are on the fence about, stop being on the fence. Just cut them. Get rid. Use them as trade capital. Because like if you're on the fence at week 9, when it's week 12 and it's crunch time, it's too late. So those players that you're on the fence about keeping, do I like them? Do I like playing them? You put them in your lineup and you're not very confident on. Just get rid. Just start looking at trades. No matter how many leagues you're in, the ones that you're underperforming in. If you're 9-0, you don't need to worry about trading. 3-6 struggling to make the playoffs or worse than 3-6. Those players that are letting you down or just barely staying in your squad, just get rid. Get rid, because now is the time. You need upside on everything. Yeah, you have lost the opportunity now to play it safe every week.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think you've got to, for me, a lot of people in fantasy football, and I've said this for a few years, they seek groupthink consensus, right? So before they do a trade, they will, or right after they've done a trade, they will go and put it on X or Twitter or on a Discord channel or wherever everyone is, right? And they'll go and seek approval that they've done like the right thing. And for me, and I see this more and more with rankings, right? Preseason more than anything. And I've said this for a few years, so I don't have any problem saying this, that for me, there is a real need for players to seek consensus. And I don't think seeking advice is a bad thing. I think seeking the consensus is a bad thing. For me, I think you've got to be contrarian. What everyone is trying to do, I think you've got to tilt the other way. You've got to, because if you do what everyone else does and you draft the way everyone else drafts, you've turned it into a luck game. That if everyone is drafting running back, wide receiver, quarterback, tight end, effectively almost in a similar sort of vein, and everyone's kind of picking the same like positions every round, you are effectively playing into the hands of everybody else. And then what you're doing is it's all down to it's attrition. If you will probably win the league. And then what happens is when your players don't win, you besmirch the bad luck. So then what happens is people go, oh, well, I had rotten injury luck this year because I drafted these players and they all got injured. And there's an element of that. Of course there is. But if you have gone on a contrarian build, and I think if you've gone away from it, you end up more than likely doing something a bit different, and therefore you've actually got more pathways to take advantage of injuries and more advantage of those teams that have struggled, because actually the pieces that you need, a lot of other teams have, and you've got a lot of pieces spare that they really need. And then you can start bartering where you can make both rosters better. You can make both rosters better. Like, you don't have to win a trade, but you can get pieces, they can get pieces, and you can both actually build up better together. And I think people try too much. They've got a fear of losing, a fear of getting decisions wrong, and don't want to take risks. And I feel that so many fantasy players try and play it safe. And I think the difference between really good fantasy players and really great fantasy players are the ones that are contrarian, will do something different and will take the risk and will own it and just go like, right, okay. Where everybody's trying to ship a player, I've got to buy in because let's see what happens.
Yeah, I totally agree. Totally agree. But I love your point about group consensus. When you do that, I mean, when you're in leagues for years with the same people, how many times do you ever see the people that win your league year on year? When do they ever go out and get group consensus?
Yeah, they don't.
They make a call and they stick with it, and then they win the league. You don't get your league winners asking for the opinion of everyone else in the league, because they just go out, do the trade, pick up the players, and win the league.
And they get mocked. You know, a lot of these players, a lot of these players that the casuals that are drafting in the home league is so weird because the values are just completely out of the window. You're the one going into it as a fish because you're going in with an expectation of where everyone's going. And then actually, those players are just wild, but they've either got a plan and it's very different, and they've thrown you and it's thrown your game completely out of whack, in which case you're left chasing and scrambling. Or they don't have a plan and they've just gone whatever. And then in which case, fair play to them, like they've gone with what they think is best. And, you know, you can't argue it. But I think, you're exactly right in the fact that there were so many people this offseason said, I can't draft Alvin Kamara. And I don't understand that. Like, as logic, I don't understand it. The guy's coming off a top 12 running back season, and he missed 3 games because of suspension, not injury, suspension. It's like, oh, he's 29. Oh, I can't draft Derrick Henry. He's 30. Can't draft him. And you're sitting there like, Derrick Henry's gone to one of the rushing, best rushing offenses in the NFL.
Yeah, okay. He's RB1 on the season.
Yeah, and this is
and Alvin Kamara's too. There's your RB1 and RB2 on the year.
And people didn't want him. And listen, if you drafted CMC, pick one, I get you. That's horrific luck. Like that one, you can own to luck. That's bad luck. But then if you sat there and passed on those 2 players and you picked up, I mean, I can't even remember now who was the hotness, but like if you pass those 2 up for like Marvin Harrison Jr. and these sort of young dynasty influences and rookies, you paid a price, and you paid a big one, because those, like, sometimes in a redraft league, going old is not a bad thing. They know what they're doing. They're seasoned veterans. Yes, there's an injury risk to certain players. Derrick Henry's never really had a significant injury in his career. Yes, he's due one, but you can't play like that. That's playing it safe. What if he takes that twice rushing champion form into the best rushing offense in the NFL and smashes it? That's what I want to buy. That's what I bought in quite a few leagues. And I think people are too scared, and they go, well, these top fantasy analysts have said you can't draft running backs over 28 years old. It's like best ball, right? Everyone's obsessed with stacking. And I perfectly buy into the fact that 4 or 5 years ago, when very few people were doing it, stacking gave you a significant advantage. I've got no doubt about it. No doubt. Like, I buy that. I would love to see the analysis now that everyone does stacking, of what's the likelihood of winning with significant stacks. Because I bet you it's not anywhere near what it was.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Because
actually,
people,
I bet it's not either.
Yeah, because people reach to make the stacks. So like, I paid a 2-round higher price so I could complete my Raven stack or my Bengal stack or whatever stack they're trying to create. And then what they're doing is, because they're reaching for value, they're actually not drafting the right value replacement. And so what happens is they've got a very top-heavy squad that if an injury happens, they're kind of blown out. I'm really curious. I'd love to see the analysis now, because that's my point of it. I kind of veered off topic, and this is what happens when I get on my soapbox. But this is why I think groupthink consensus is difficult, because I think if you start leaning into the narrative too much, you end up chasing something that's already happened. You're chasing a result that's already been determined. If everyone goes that way, I want to go the other way. If everyone's going running back first round, I'll take top wide receiver. If everyone's going wide receiver, I'm going to take the top running back. Like, I want to pivot everywhere I can. And for me, there were some big values. There were some glaring values. We pointed it out in the preseason. I pointed it out about 50 times. I'm not going to list them all off, but there were some glaring, and I'm finding every single year now there's significant ADP gaps where there are players that are criminally undervalued that you can scoop up, and then that should be the basis of your strategy. So I've got teams that have littered with the same players because the value was just nuts. Like, I can't leave them there another round. It can't happen. But I also think that if you do that, you've got to then really buy into it. But then you've got to be prepared to pivot when something changes. If you lose a Chris Godwin, if you lose a significant piece, you've got to pivot. But losing a Chris Godwin shouldn't hurt you like losing a Christian McCaffrey should, because you drafted Christian.
Oh, absolutely not.
You drafted Chris Godwin in the 6th round, or the 5th round, and yes, he's the wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3 on the season at the time he got injured, but you didn't draft him to be that. So yes, it hurts your team, but it shouldn't hurt you half as much as losing your first overall pick for 9 games, because that stinks, because that was your foundational piece of your team. So sometimes, like, if people moan to me that, like, I lost my league because I lost Chris Godwin, I'm like, yeah, it's crap. I get you. It is crap, but it's not like I'm suffering. I've got Chris Godwin on 72% of my leagues. And I get it, it's crap, but you should be built enough to where that's not a significant hit. Like,
you didn't lose your league because your 6th round pick got injured.
No. And I think that's the key is don't besmirch luck, and don't just count yourself out. Like, for me, when I'm looking at teams now, I put teams into 3 buckets, right? So I've got my 7 wins to 9 wins, 6 wins to 3 wins, and my 2 wins to 0 wins. And luckily, I don't have any 0-win teams, thank goodness. So it's lucky. But
I wouldn't admit it anyway.
I'm really lucky.
They're all 9-0. They're all 9-0.
All 9-0. Yeah, smashed it, mate. I've already won my leagues. I'm just turned up waiting for the trophies. In those leagues that I'm 9-0, 8-1, 7-2, I'm thinking about playoff schedule. So I'm thinking about the playoff schedule. I'm thinking about who's got the best fantasy schedules. And then what I'm also doing is I'm loading up with running backs. So I want handcuffs, because if I lose a player, I want the next best thing, and I don't want to bid for it or have to be on the waiver wire, and I'm not going to get him as the 12th pick because I've got the best record. So for me, I'm thinking about how do I give my team the best opportunity to win. And I remember when Hunt got cut in 2018 and Williams took over, and I already had Williams on my roster on 3 of my teams that year, because I just did this philosophy and literally had him. Same with CJ Anderson. When Todd Gurley was injured, CJ Anderson came in, and you do this a few times. where you just stockpile some talent. So look at, there's a good tool on Fantasy Pros, running back handcuffs. I'm not going to list them all here. What I would say is obviously target the really good offenses. So for me, Konami Vidal behind J.K. Dobbins and that running first offense would be someone that would be a big target for me. I'm looking at ones that are keenly available. Dalvin Cook potentially behind Rico Dowdle. It's not amazing, but given the injuries there, they might run the football more. If something happens to Dowdle, it's not Zeke. He's finished in Dallas. So it's going to be Dalvin Cook.
We didn't even touch on that, did we? What is Zeke doing?
He's finished, isn't he? But he's absolutely finished. So that's a big one there. Roschon Johnson he's absolutely done. Roschon Johnson for Chicago Bears, I think, is one that you could pick up. Justice Hill for the Ravens, if something happens to Henry. Tyler Algier for Bijan. Trey Benson for James Conner. These are all players I would be targeting. Kenneth Gainwell for Saquon. Saquon gets injuries. It's something that could happen. Jalen Warren for Najee Harris. Zach Charbonnet for Kenneth Walker. Those are the kind of players. And I'd like to start stacking now. If you're 7-2, 9-0, or anywhere in between there, start stacking your running backs and just have a few. Once you've got your bye weeks out of the way, if your quarterback bye weeks happened and you've got a top quarterback, bench, you don't need a backup quarterback. Don't need backup defense. Don't need backup tight end. Strip them all out. Literally just have them and a couple of wide receivers. If you're 2 wins and below, you need to trade your way out and trade your best player.
Yeah.
Trade your best player. You have to.
Yeah.
Have to just trade your best player. If that's Josh Allen, if that's Lamar Jackson, you can't be Josh. You can't have Lamar Jackson and have 2 wins. I refuse to believe that.
Yeah.
But I think, you got to trade your way out, and you got to do it now. You haven't got any time, so you need to trade your way out. Worst case scenario, it doesn't work. You've already out of the playoffs, so you might as well spin the dice and get a haul back. Try and build with lots of. Think about total points, right? So if your quarterback's 20 points and you trade a couple of menial pieces that don't play in your lineup, and you get 3 really good pieces back, and they add 40 points to your lineup, that's 20 plus points every week. That might be the difference between you making the playoffs or not. And you've already said some of the advice about trading. You've already said the advice about waiver wires. But if you were sitting there with a 3-win, 4-win team now with some decent pieces, most of your buys are out of the way, but you don't have a showstopper, what would you do?
I don't know. Other than trading, like you need to. You got to trade your way out. There's no other way. There is no other way. You got to trade your way out of it. I mean, you're going to sit there and bank on luck. The great Billy Zane in Titanic said, "A real man makes his own luck." And you make your own luck by going out and getting them players. And you take those players that you're on the fence about, and you trade 2 for 1. You go and find the teams that are 0-9, 1-8, and you give them 2 for 1.
Yeah. It's 100%.
And that's what you do.
2 for 1, 3 for 2, that sort of thing. Yeah, you've absolutely got to do that. One final piece of advice I'm going to give here is, if you can, see if you can buy Breece Hall low, Tyrone Tracy low. Those 2 players over the next 5 weeks have the 3rd and 4th easiest fantasy schedules to running back. So they are players I would easily be targeting. Isaiah Pacheco could be back this week. He's a player you could target. He's got the 6th easiest schedule. Ramondre Stevenson, who hasn't pulled up trees, he's got the 7th easiest schedule. There's some players there you could absolutely try and sort of capitalize on for position at wide receiver with easy schedules. Chicago Bears, so maybe Keenan Allen. I'm not sure I'd buy DJ Moore with what's going on. Wan'Dale Robinson. The Giants have the 2nd easiest schedule, so Wan'Dale Robinson's got a couple of really nice fixtures coming up. That could be a really easy piece to try and pick up. Tennessee have the 5th easiest. So what you've just said there about Nick Westbrook-Akeen, there's room for him here over the next 5 weeks, so definitely take advantage of that. Quentin Johnston's on waivers most leagues. Pick him up, 6th easiest schedule. There's definitely some room here with some of these players to take advantage. Cortland Sutton, 10th easiest schedule. People will be a bit frustrated with him. Definitely try and buy in on that schedule. So there's definitely areas here where you can.
Cortland Sutton's had back-to-back 100-yard weeks as well now.
That's true. So it might be a harder one to get in.
If you're going to buy Cortland Sutton, buy him now.
Yeah, because you're not going to get
if he does it
longer.
again this week, you're not going to get him.
By Cade Otton, that might be quite a difficult one to do, but more often than not, he was a backup to people. If you can buy Cade Otton now, he's got the 5th easiest tight end schedule, and he's the number 1 receiving target on that team until at least the bye, and maybe the week after the bye. So try and do that. Definitely try and get involved with that one. And also Tre'Davious Sanders, he had a bit of a bounce back this week. They've got a nice easy schedule over the next few weeks to try and take advantage of that one. So there's some actionable advice here on the pod, and I realize we've got a bit over. So thanks so much for joining me, pal. Why don't you tell everyone listening all over the world a little bit about where they can find you, where they can find the amazing team with Pete and H and the pod, the content, leagues you do, everything. And take the next 2 or 3 minutes, just tell us about who you are, what you do, and everything in between.
Oh yeah, cheers, mate. So we are Jefferson My Drinks Fantasy Podcast. There's a long explanation as to why we called that, which I won't go into, but you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, X. We are at JMD Pod. We are also on YouTube. We started that this year, so we are desperate to get off the ground. So if you can all jump onto YouTube and find us at JMD Pod, give us a subscription, give us a share. We'd really appreciate that because, we really enjoy doing what we do. We do one show a week because we've all got families and we can't get 3 of us together more than once a week, as I'm sure most grown-ups will appreciate. And it's what getting old does to you, I suppose. We really appreciate the support, and any extra listens we can get, we'd love it.
Definitely check them out.
Yeah, sorry, while I'm on that, we also do run a charity league. It's the JMD JTT Dynasty Trophy. We've got 4 leagues going this year. We are going to be looking at expanding that for next year. So if you can get on board with us now, when we announce the expansion of our charity leagues, you can be first in line for that.
It'd be awesome. Definitely reach out. Definitely check out Harrow and the team there, because they're phenomenal guys doing great work, and they're fantasy degenerates like all of us who play in a lot of leagues. I think I've recruited you and Pete are playing about 20 leagues this season.
Yeah.
You played some weird and wonderful ones as well.
They're my favourite ones.
Yeah.
Like the weird and wonderful ones, like Guillotine Leagues, the Squid Game League. Even though I'm out, Tyrone Tracy killed me in that.
Yeah.
I missed out by one point in the Squid Game. But yeah, those weird and wonderful ones, like the Rules Mania, love it.
Yeah, it's definitely their wild leagues. But yeah, appreciate you coming on, bailing me out of a sitch, and bringing the knowledge in the chat. Feel like there's a lot here for people to really unpick now to try and get some wins. But we're moving into the double-digit weeks now. It is week 10. If you're listening in America, please do go out and vote whoever you vote for. We don't have to deal with the consequences of who you vote for, but it's important that you vote one way or the other. And for everybody else, enjoy the week. Enjoy fireworks night if you're here in the UK. Hopefully you stayed in and listened to this instead of going to your local fireworks. If you haven't, then feel free to check us out. Hit that like and subscribe button. And don't forget, as always, Rush Nation, we'll be back with more content through the week, and we're here to help you win your leagues. But don't forget, as always, keep rushing.